On the night of 27th April, a C-130J aircraft of the Indian Air Force landed on a small airstrip at Wadi Saidna, 40 km north of Khartoum in Sudan. The airstrip had a degraded surface, no navigational support, and most importantly, not even landing lights that are necessary to guide the aircraft for landing at night. The aircrew used their electro-optical infrared sensors to take stock of the runway condition and then landed on the airstrip, where a Turkish plane was fired upon on the very same day. Upon landing, 8 Garud commandos of the Indian Air Force, using their night vision goggles, secured the passengers and took off, making it one of the most daring rescues carried out in the history of the Indian Air Force. But what prompted the need for this rescue of Indian nationals from Sudan? In this video, we'll discuss the crisis in Sudan, a little bit of history of the country and the conflict. Hello guys, I am Saurav and welcome to the Arc. So Sudan lies in the northeast Africa, with Egypt in the north and Saudi Arabia across the Red Sea in the east. It is Africa's third largest country by area and has a population of around 46 million. Before getting into the current conflict, we need to go a little back in history and go through the relevant parts. This is the timeline of Sudan's recent history. Sudan was under joint British-Egyptian rule from 1899 to 1955. In 1956, it gained independence. But it's not all good since then. There has been a political turmoil in the country with multiple coups and civil wars. The first civil war started in 1955 for greater regional autonomy for the Christian majority southern region from the Muslim majority northern region. It ended in 1972 after a peace agreement and 500,000 people's death. In between, Colonel Jafar Nimeri carried out a coup in 1969 and became president. Second Sudanese Civil War started in 1893 as a continuation of the First Civil War and also to preserve the natural resources of the southern region. Omar al-Bashir, a brigadier general in the Sudanese army then, carried out a military coup in 1989 and appointed himself president in 1993. Then the War of Darfur started in 2003. The Sudan Liberation Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement rebel groups started fighting against the government of Sudan, accusing the government of oppressing Darfur's non-Arab population. Government responded with the ethnic cleansing of non-Arab population in Darfur. The UN estimates that up to 300,000 people were killed in the fighting. In 2009, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for President Bashir on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity relating to the war in Darfur. Meanwhile, the civil war that was ongoing in the southern region finally reached its conclusion in 2011. South Sudan gained independence. In December 2018, the Sudan government, to avoid an economic collapse, cut subsidies on fuel, bread, etc. People took to the streets protesting against this move, and the protest transformed later for removal of President Bashir, who was in charge for nearly 30 years by then. After months of protests, President Omar al-Bashir was overthrown by the military and was put under house arrest. And this is where we can say the current conflict has its roots. When the military intervened and Omar al-Bashir was ousted, there was massive anger against al-Bashir. He was then replaced by the Transitional Military Council, and it was agreed upon on 5th of July 2019 for a 39-month transition process to return to democracy. The transition process was abruptly interrupted by another coup in October 2021 by the Sudanese military, led by General Abdel Fattah al Burhan, the head of the Transitional Military Council. And TMC was dissolved. This move by the military was opposed by the people, and protests started again. Following public pressure, in November 2021, Burhan agreed to restore the transition to civilian rule, with elections slated for July 2023. After this, there were multiple meetings and negotiations between the military and civilian leaders for restoring democracy in Sudan, but nothing really worked out. People continued their protests and it was violently suppressed. By January 2023, another challenge emerged. The Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, went rogue. This paramilitary force is primarily comprised of the Janjaweed militias, who fought on behalf of the Sudanese government during the war in Darfur, and was responsible for atrocities against civilians. RSF was also deployed for a violent crackdown on the pro-democracy protesters during the 2019 protests. General al-Burhan now wants integration of the RSF with the Sudanese army, which is opposed by his deputy, Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemetti, who commands the RSF. So the conflict now is a power struggle between these two men, the de facto president and chief of the army, Abdel Fattah al Burhan, and Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo. But is this only a power struggle for control over the country? Not entirely true. There are significant business interests involved here. Hemetti comes from the Mehria tribe in Darfur region. In 2017, Hemetti used the RSF to take over control of gold mines in Darfur region, making him one of the richest people in Sudan by 2019, with his company Al-Junaid, that is involved in mining, transport, steel businesses. His wealth is also utilized to fund his paramilitary force. There is also an international angle to this. Hemetti reportedly has close relations with Russia and the UAE, possibly for selling his gold. Recently, there was also a report that a deal was being worked out for a Russian base in the Red Sea, which is not acceptable by the US. Therefore, countries like the US, Russia, UAE, Saudi Arabia have significant interest in this country, and all are battling for influence in Sudan. Coming back to the current Sudan crisis. On 15th April, intense gunfight and explosions around the capital region of Khartoum were reported. RSF being deployed around the capital region was seen as a threat by the army. And since then, intense fighting has spread to other parts of the country. More than 500 people have died in the violent conflict since it started. Countries are now struggling to evacuate their citizens from the war-torn country. India launched a massive evacuation operation of Indian nationals from Sudan on 24th April, named Operation Kaveri. It's a joint operation by the Indian Air Force and Indian Navy, coordinated by the MEA. IAF has deployed its C-130J and C-17 transporter aircraft, and the Navy has deployed the INS Sumedha ship. More than 2,400 Indian citizens have been evacuated from Sudan as of 29th April 2023. The operation is still ongoing and Indian nationals are being evacuated from Sudan. At this point, we can only hope that the fighting stops and situation in Sudan becomes normal again. And also, Sudan doesn't become the ground for proxy wars among bigger nations. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon with a new video. Thank you.